All right, now that I've given you a framework, I have a lot more to share with you about conversion. So let's get started. Particularly, what I'm looking to do is give you more of an understanding of conversion and some overall kind of templates to follow with that. I don't mean actual sales letters, but you'll see what I mean. Like kind of overall schemes to follow. And then I particularly want to talk some more about this one, the first and the fourth part of the framework. I think that the middle two are fairly easy to understand and were covered fairly thoroughly in the first video. I might think of some things that I want to share at some point, but mainly that's what I want to cover. So let's continue on to the next slide. Right. I want you to have kind of you have a framework, but now I want you to have kind of a mental picture or mental model for conversion. And I have two of them for you here, written right here. For one thing, I want you to understand that conversion is not linear. It's a process of getting, and it's also might not be something that only happens once. It might happen continuously depending on the situation. What you're trying to do with conversion is you want to get and then presumably keep somebody over a particular threshold. There's something in life called a threshold phenomena, or excuse me, that I call a threshold phenomenon. You want to be able to recognize phenomena like this when they occur. They're all over the place. It's times when it's not linear, where you take whatever, if you, in something linear, then you move forward one unit and you get one more unit of like benefit. So like with income, then it's somewhat linear for a while. Actually, with income for your life, it's like a plateau phenomenon where your life gets better and better up to a certain amount of income. And then studies tend to show, and a little bit of common sense tends to show that it plateaus out and you don't really get much more quality of life. The drawbacks and benefits start to cancel each other out once you hit, I don't know, in America, it's something around $75,000 a year in income. It's not that I'm advocating stopping there. I'm just giving an example of there's different types of curves in life. But with money in general, then for every more dollar you earn, you have that much more purchasing power. So that's linear. But with conversion, then if you get somebody 90% of the way to buying your product and then they don't, then you basically got zero, right? And if you get someone 101% of the way, or if you get them 170% of the way to buying your product, then it's all the same result. Now, it might also be separate in terms of keeping them there. This is a big mistake people make in relationships, is they think by accident of a relationship is making a sale or getting a girl or getting a ring from a guy, getting married, and then people all of a sudden behave differently after marriage or after a few months into marriage. They stop thinking, they don't realize that every new day, you have to make sure that you're keeping someone over a threshold of enthusiasm and enjoying the relationship and feeling good about you. So ideally, you both stay way ahead. But then one thing I tell guys, I'm giving them advice about dating, is that just because she did something with you the last night doesn't mean that the next day when you go on a date, she's ready to start right where you left off, right? You have to make sure that in essence, that they're over the buying threshold again. Now you might be 70% in there again the next day. You're not starting from scratch, but you still might need to make sure you go from 70 to 100 if you want to have a certain result. So having this mental model just helps you just focus and not get confused. I know it's fairly obvious once you think about it, but if it's not clear, sometimes things are obvious once you take a moment to notice. But if you didn't just take that one moment and have that mental picture, then it was surprisingly vague and you might have accidentally not behaved this way. This is a reason to be aware of the idea of always be closing, right? It's sometimes called the ABCs in sales, right? ABC stands for always be closing, meaning that it tends to be beneficial from like fairly periodically give someone the chance to buy, because you can actually take yourself out of a sale too, right? Someone could be ready to buy. And then if you keep talking, so to speak, of course, online, it's a little bit different. But the way this works online is you generally want people to be able to have the ability to buy. I know that once in a while, people get really technical and they split test different things. And they notice that if you give someone a buy link or withhold it for a certain amount of time, and then you give it to them just at the right time, what I would do is wait until you have a reasonable chance of making a sale. And then again, unless you're going to get really into trying to measure exactly what to do when, but if you're not going to be a super duper professional and focus on it, and this is the way I've always done it without being overly technical, and the way I'm talking about is I just wait until I have an understanding of about when it would make sense to first give someone the ability to buy, like by giving them a link. And then starting there, you make sure they have a link pretty available throughout the events in people's lives, and just their own minds are pretty hard to predict from your perspective if you're trying to sell someone. So generally allowing people to buy, or certainly if you're in person, like if you're trying to get a local client, then doing a little bit of a check to see if they're ready to become just go and become your client or pay you, make the deal. Then it's good to have a little bit of an ability to give a little bit of a check to see if they can do it, right? You can maybe dangle a little bit. You don't want to, a separate thing that I also plan on mentioning later in the video is that you want to make sure you don't get people in the habit of saying no, because of course, I don't know if it's of course or not for you, but certainly if someone's, or if you can also, dating is a good parallel example. Often if you're trying to think about conversion for a business situation, you can also imagine a dating situation. And often there's some similar rules hold up because it's still a conversion situation. So if you're suggesting something and the girl's no, and then you suggest another thing and she says no, and then suggest another thing and she says no, then of course she's getting primed, like I mentioned in the previous video, for saying no. So you don't want that. So you want to dangle an opportunity for people to buy out there, but you don't necessarily just want to really confront them and force them to say no right to your face. All right. So how you have that in mind without getting someone over the threshold. Anytime when you want to keep them over a threshold, such as if you don't want them to refund, or if you want them to keep buying stuff from you in the future, or if you want them to consume your product and become successful and go all the way to giving you a success report, then you want to have a plan for that throughout your conversion process. You want to keep in mind whether or not you're going to want them to be with you the next day, right? And so which threshold are you trying to get them over? And you plan for that in your whole story and whole process and sales letter and sales process. Another thing I keep in mind that helps me remember that you need to lead someone from where they're at to where you want them to be, which is a very easy mistake to make, is they end up getting too focused on where they want the person to be. And it blinds them to seeing where the person's at right now, like the prospective customer. So you're the salesperson, so to speak. You're writing something online or you're in person talking to someone, right? If you're all picturing the end result, the sale, then that mental picture is interfering with your ability to see what's right in front of your face, or what you might be able to see in front of your face if you were able to pay more clear attention and you weren't cluttered by being so focused on the end result that you don't just see where they are, right? So if you think of walking them through the story, but imagine a story where, I don't know, whatever story comes to mind, whatever, you could just imagine a story where someone's going through a town, right? Walking through a town might not be the most fascinating story, but so you're imagining you need to walk them through the town. So you're holding their hand standing where they are, right? And you're looking around and you have an idea of where you want to go, but you're very aware of where you are now. And you're looking out for obstacles and things that can get in your way and making sure that you're taking the right directions and right turns, right? And so forth. Or you can imagine you're walking them through a maze. And then by having this mental picture and this mental model, I would say in general for understanding conversion, you want something that helps like a model that provides a framework around your way of thinking about the situation, so that you naturally remember to pay attention to where they're at right now constantly. And just don't people often get frustrated and skip steps if they're too focused on where they want the person to be. They just want them to get there already. And so you're trying to get pushy and so forth. Keeping this in mind can really help you too. Okay, so let me give you two little schemes that can help you. I did not invent either one of these. These are quite well known. They're pretty basic. But if you don't know either one of them, or if they're not in the front of your mind, if you knew them once and forgot, then I find it consistently helpful to just remind myself of these things if I'm writing. So let's say you're writing a headline and then you're writing a bit of a story to get yourself to where you want to give the offer. Then, and you're thinking, shoot, how do I do that? Then, of course, one thing you can do is just copy existing sales letters and try to reword them. I'm not a big fan of that, although it works just fine, but I just tend to like to approach things a bit from scratch. Regardless of how you do it, even if you're copying someone else, you want to understand the elements so you can see better what you're copying. And the elements can be expressed in a few different ways. One is a problem, agitate, solve, where you're identifying a problem. Remember that you want to, sometimes people think, to sell, there's all kinds of just one-liners when it comes to sales advice. And one of those one-liners is you just need to tell a story, right? And that's ridiculous. I mean, that as a one-liner, it's moronic. Sure, stories sometimes can be a great integral part of a sales process, But first of all, the idea that a story in and of itself is entertaining and that someone just going to stop and listen is ludicrous, right? They have to know the benefit first. People don't just stop and pay attention and stop what they're doing and drop their goals just because someone starts telling a story. So the first thing you need to do, no matter what, don't be like, let me tell you a story. And then they have no idea where you're going. Again, either in person or on an online thing, no matter what you're doing, they've got to know what the benefit is, that benefit has to connect to them, to where they're at. It can't be something that you see as a benefit, even if it would be a benefit to them. You have to connect it up to something they know they want. And that has to be clear starting out, no matter how you do anything else. So don't forget that when I give you these schemes. So problem, and you want to just start talking about a problem. Like you might say, if you're talking about weight loss, whatever, it could be hard to lose weight, or you tried a bunch of things. By the way, I wouldn't try to state the problem in terms of nothing else you've ever tried worked. Every time you buy, you don't want to get a person in a state or primed to remember times when they regret a lot of their other purchases. So if you start talking about how, like, whatever they buy, a weight loss product, then it hasn't helped them in the past, then that's no good, right? Because you might be defining a problem and it might be a real problem that they want to solve, but it's also going to get them to regret purchasing stuff and getting them that frame of mind. So you might still make the sale, but that element, that part of what you just did is going to take you backwards. So try to look at the various things that you're implying, right? And the sum total of what you're implying is going to get you results. But you basically want to make them aware of a problem and like the headline might give them a kind of some sense of your solution. And then once they have a sense that you have a plan to solve their problem, then from a headline, all right, here is a headline, and maybe someone could have written a better headline or not, but one way or the other, we got extremely good conversion with entire sales letters for a previous product of ours from around March of last year called Commission Conspiracy. And it's fairly extensive, but if you look down here, we see the reports of lots of people making money. And remember, this is basically since about February or March, our silver bullet, our way that we stand out is our earnings reports. And so we're getting how we stand out right in the headline, and we're getting a clear idea of what they're going to get by buying our product, which is they can be like these people that through us, by following our coaching and training, they've made money, right? May I tell you some wonderful news about a big group of people, a group that I hope will include you in just a few minutes. These folks wanted success, but they were also stuck, stressed, skeptical, and sometimes just plain scared. So I'm defining a problem. Then they joined our one-man gang conspiracy and made a massive comeback because they could see, feel, learn, and experience what was true about money getting on the internet. So again, maybe someone could have written something better, but this certainly worked, right? Because when you get the right elements, you don't have to be that clever. You don't have to do it perfectly or not. And maybe this was the best thing we ever could. This scrolls down. This kind of continues where we even added on more and more earnings reports that were coming in. So that kind of constitutes our entire headline. Then we went into a bit of a narrative. Okay. So we, in essence, give a sense of a clear, like clearly there's a group of people that you can join, and they went from the problem of being stuck, stressed, skeptical, and sometimes to making money on the internet. Right. And it's all pretty immediately clear that it's about making money on the internet. Here's our solution. Here's our USP and so forth. Here's one that's copied from a John Carlton, I think, original sales letter, where it's for Project X. And we were mainly doing webinars promoting this. And so that provides a terrific frame, as we talk about in the conversion framework, the final thing, frame and context. So we're not really relying on this letter to make the sale from scratch like we were with the other one. In the other one, it was pretty much full on making sales from cold people that don't really know us very well at all. In this, we have people that are pretty favorably disposed. And so we used a kind of an adaptation of an existing framing, which can work. An open letter to everyone who secretly suspects or even knows in their heart that you need an unstoppable advantage if you really want to make money online. And then it goes on. You can pause it if you want to take a look. We don't particularly have our main way we stand out or stand alone in that headline as we did for the Commission Conspiracy one. But again, people had generally seen webinars if they're coming to that sales letter. And the webinars really strongly stressed which particularly we try to stand alone with, and that's with our success reports. With people that didn't have that framing from a webinar on the first sales letter I showed you, we made sure to get that right in right off the bat. So I was obeying the being clear over everything else. You want to be clear. and then you want to involve with the problem, investigate it and show how it's so hard to solve it and important, or really make them feel the problem. And then you want to provide a solution. And then you segue kind of smoothly into your providing your solution, and that becomes your offer. When you're doing your offer, you generally want to, it depends, but this may be a place where you want to reaffirm what's unique about you, where you stand out. It's not always absolutely necessary to do it there, but something to keep in mind. And then you want the other, I'm not saying you take action, but you want them to take action and purchase right now. Now, this is fairly variable. Often copywriters really focus in on getting people to take action now, people that are doing. And interestingly enough, that isn't necessarily something that you should just follow as a knee-jerk reaction, or I really treat this on a case-by-case basis. And when you're in contact with somebody, like they're on an email list, or there was a great example with one of our members who has, his name is Tim Schmidt, and he has a very successful skincare website where it's his own product that he gets manufactured. And it makes, basically, it does tens of millions of sales a year. And before he did that, though, he was actually selling SEO services to people. Like his company, he was working for a company that did SEO services, got traffic to people's websites, and he would call up business owners and get them to buy the SEO services. He didn't do SEO himself at that point, search engine optimization, but he would sell like his company services. And one way that he became very successful with that is, instead of the other salespeople would try to make the sale right in one call on the phone and really get the people to buy right then, because there's a general idea that if someone doesn't purchase on the first call, they're not going to, if they're like, oh, can I have your contact information and call you later? They probably won't. But the reality is that you can either try to make it happen, or the nature of your situation might be that you are going to be in contact with that person again, that you can initiate. So generally in our business, we have multiple opportunities to make the sale. They'll get on an email list of ours, or they'll be an affiliate promoting us, where the affiliate will do multiple promotions, or at least promote us again in the near future or something like that. If that's the case, then we can do a little bit less of this kind of high pressure, take action now. Often the trouble is this often has to be faked, right? I'll constantly look for a natural way to have deadlines and closing, like where the offer is off sale for a little while and so forth. But unless you just have no way of seeing the person again that you're trying to make the sale to, then I guess you might have to really try to manufacture a reason for them to take action. Oh, it's a one-day sale. But often these are just literally lies, right? It's very common online for people to have these little programs and scripts and things that they're always claiming that this is no longer going to be available tomorrow, and it's just simply false. It's not like a half-truth, it's just fully not. So you can choose whether you want to go that route if there's no other option or whatever. But I'm usually not in that position. And I usually don't really like to just fully say something that's not true, particularly if I can get caught pretty easily. So you can also try to think about how easy it is for people to figure out that you're just BSing them. I was watching a video sales letter with it was some kind of supplement that had to do with, helping it was probiotics. And they were claiming that there was this discount that because of this, whatever reason, right now, usually it sells like for $69, they said, and now it's for $39. So then I just go to the homepage of their website, and it's selling for $39 on like the homepage of their website. So maybe that still helps them, but I just find that stuff to be silly. So my point here is just to step back, think about some way to have natural scarcity. And we have it naturally with coaching programs where we can only do it in certain kind of blocks of time. With Project X, there's kind of like a January through April block. And we have to close it for a while. And then that works to create a bit of scarcity. And we find ways to do that, but when it's natural and makes sense, and we don't do it every second, we don't do it every time, and just with a bunch of obvious BS. And that way it tends to work when we do it, and we don't blow out our people and cause people not to believe us. Because the trouble is, we don't just need credibility for sales. Our main thing is customer success, which relies on people trusting us in general, because they have to trust us for our training too, right? So if we're being obviously dishonest in our sales, then how are we supposed to expect people to really take our training seriously? So we have to take that into account. So you just need to step back and take into account the totality of your situation, whenever it is there, and do the best you can with getting people to take action in a way that makes sense. And I don't know if I completed my story with Tim, but he did so much better than his peers, than the other salesmen, because he would just call people back. Like he would just let them make it like a multi-part sales process with a kind of it's called like a sales funnel. Like the way you might funnel like flour into something where you have a wide thing and you draw the flour along to a narrower thing over time. So he would just use multiple phone calls and draw people along into a bit of a process. And it worked far better than just trying to do a high pressure sale right then in one phone call, and much, much better results. And then you want to have your testimonials. I've tried leading with testimonials. It's one thing to lead with like earnings numbers of people. That's pretty cool if you have that. But in a lot of cases, leading with testimonials, you can imagine it with dating, where if you walk up to a girl and are like, yeah, this other girl liked me and this girl liked me, it should be a little bit subtle in the background. If you put testimonials too much in people's face, it's also just not where people are at. People don't really care. And this took me a little while to figure out. I remember when I first did my first year, I taught accelerated learning, and it really went over terrifically. And I got these kind of evaluations at the end that were essentially like testimonials, but really numerical, and people wrote comments. It was really nice. And I did a good job. And I did a good job they ended up saying really great things about the course. And so then I thought, ooh, maybe if I like turn this into a flyer. And I made a flyer where I gave composites of the different scores people gave for a rank on a scale of 1 to 10, whether you can read faster now. And the average score would be like a 9 point something. And then how's your comprehension, with 5 being the same, and their comprehension, they rated it like a 7 or 8, and so forth. But when I made that into a flyer, where that's like the first top of the funnel, it's called, right? The first thing that prospective customers will see before they come to an information session, it wasn't the right time for it. No one cared at that point, because until they have a question about whether they want to buy your product, the testimonial isn't generally going to matter to them. And you can, again, distinguish that from a particularly powerful earnings report, like a result report, like a success report, earnings report, whatever. That can be a little bit different, and that can be turned into something that can occur much earlier, because it's a little bit more of a headline type of situation, or an introductory type of thing. It's not necessarily true that'll work perfectly. In some cases it will, in some cases it won't. And whether it works will have to do with just a lot of little contextual factors that we've been covering. So you can use your judgment and you can try different things. But for sure, just a normal testimonial is not a good way to start. So you want to put those around the edge. You can start with testimonials. You don't have to wait until after the offer. You can work them in, especially if it goes a little bit with your story thread somehow. We can also sometimes run them down the side a little. I've had good success with that. I haven't really exactly split tested running it down the side with putting with the exact same letter down at the bottom, so I can't really tell you. But this gives you a general scheme to follow that'll always work within reason. And then another scheme, which is different, but ultimately obviously has similarities. It works. This works in person, but it certainly works in a video sales letter or an online, just text. Is the abbreviation is feel, felt, found. Again, this is a well-known technique within the sales profession, where the idea is you're communicating to the prospective customer, I know how you feel. And to know that, you have to hear how they feel in the first place, right? You don't want to assume. So this kind of reminds you to find out where they're at. And then you said, I felt the same way, and then here's my solution, right? These pills cured it, or gave me all this energy, or made me lose weight, or made me make money, or that sort of thing. If I skip over to the letter I wrote for prospective customers who were not warmed up with the webinars the first time they were meeting us, this is where we had the headline that I showed you with these earnings reports, this here. And so after this headline, then we talked, and let me Control plus this here for you. All right, hopefully this will be legible, but I'll just start it real quick. I'll say, I've been obsessed in a good way for the past several years. And I just wrote this kind of verbatim, and it works quite well. I've been obsessed in a good way, and it's from Mike Long's voice. I've been obsessed in a good way for the past several years with giving people something that I experienced nearly a decade ago. And this is all true. At that time, an extra $1,000 a month was big money for me, and rent being due was often a significant cause for stress. I was already doing okay online, a few $1,000s per month profit, sometimes a bunch more. But other times it felt like it might fall apart and so forth. And then it goes on to talk about how he got to see behind the scenes of someone who's making $1,000 a day. And it made such a difference, like just seeing it for real and seeing it from behind the scenes. And so I know how you feel. I felt the same way. And here's what I found is I just went straight to that essentially. So if you're at a loss of what to write, then just go through this and that works great. Especially because of course you have everything else we're talking about here and you can get all sorts of other training on conversion, but it's really nice to have a framework that everything fits into, I find. Okay, I've gone to the next slide. I want to point out something to you, and that is, all right, there's, of course, you're probably aware of the idea of social proof. The other thing would be authority, like of Oprah or somebody that a sports figure or someone else that people respect, or a guru of some, that's authority. If they just say, hey, this product is great, go buy it. And then social proof is when there's lots of people who are either peers or kind of moderate authority figures, and they're all saying, go buy this. And that can be extremely effective, but it's an overrated technique. I think a lot of people think that's like a magic pill or silver bullet for converting or becoming rich overnight or whatever with their product. And another way people think of this is that they can just get some sort of gatekeeper to give them a leg up, right? Or a word or a letter of approval or some sort of thing. I'm not a big fan of going through gatekeepers. Some people are, they're reasonably good at it, but I find that building success the right way, if you do it a bit yourself and you build it with a firm foundation, you're a lot safer. I've also been in a situation with some partners where we did go through gatekeepers and everything looked like it was going great until we started doing too well. The gatekeepers just pulled the rug out from under us, right? Because we were going to overshadow them. So, when someone makes you, right, they can break you and so forth. And the price can be really high. There's some kind of internet marketing guru types that hang out together and they all mail each other's offers and they create these big social proof situations. And what they do works for themselves and they make some money doing it. But my goodness, it's like a full-time job just kissing each other's ass, right? Just schmoozing with each other, flying on jets, taking selfies and Facebook pictures or post them on Facebook and having their whatever they buy to look good and so forth. And if you want to buy something because you want it, great. But just if it becomes your job, and then going on all these conventions and affiliate summits and meetings, and then while you're there spending thousands of dollars to impress people and all that stuff, it's not that isn't sometimes a strategy that can work for people. But I find it just pretty exhausting and high risk, weirdly, surprisingly low reward. It's a little bit like trying to become a pro sports star as like a career when you're in like high school or college. Yeah, you see the people that made it, but the price is so high and the chance of failure is fairly high too. You can really be ruthless. Use a lot of what I've shown you about goals and so forth and achieve tremendous things where the risk of failure might be even low. But if you're going to do that in the first place, then you can be on a playing field where it still isn't restrictive in terms of how few people succeed. And just what the prices of keeping it up once you do succeed is the main problem as well. These people, they might make money, but I don't even know how much they make. They might not even make that much. But when they do make it, they just hemorrhage it, right? They just spend it so fast too, just upkeeping their little social proof situation. And I know what I'm talking about because with my experience in this field, I know behind the scenes well enough to know this is what's going on. And people have a lot less money than they often look like they have. And when they make it, they just spend it like water and so forth. Building things the way I've built them is pretty nice. And it's so much less cost and effort and not exhausting. I live such a more relaxed life and I save virtually all the money that I take in. So my profit and then my savings is just so high. I don't have all these costs just in BS. So I wrote, in other words, this method's overrated and can really get you stuck. The reason it can get you stuck is that people think like they just keep trying to get over this huge hurdle. And so here they are, they're standing here. You can imagine, if you imagine a little stick figure. And here they are, there's this big barrier, they're just kind of stuck there. Instead, if they just build things and build, you don't really get stuck. And that's why I recommend search engine optimization to people so strongly, is because it's such a great way to build for yourself without having to go through gatekeepers and go through all these authority figures and get all these social proof, all this crowd on your side and try to maintain your popularity socially and all that stuff. You still want to be aware of that. Certainly any kind of social proof you can get on your side, that's good. Any kind of authority you can get on your side, great. But instead of making it your go-to strategy, then if we go over here, back to our original slide, then make the social proof and the authority, make it just part of your gravy, part of your frame and your context that is strengthening you rather than as your main thing that you're depending on. Okay, I will actually end this video here if we've gone on for 35 minutes. And then what I'll talk about in the next video, I want to talk to you a bit about how implication works with the brain and how you want to figure out how to both make headlines and then make other elements of your communications work just right for you, where you are saying the right things so that you're neither just coming out and saying things too explicitly where it can be rejected, but where you're also not being so disconnected from what you're trying to communicate, right? Like you can see this again easily in relationships where either if you're too explicit about what you want, that can backfire, or if you hint around things too vaguely or too much where the person can't connect the dots to what you want or figure out what you want, where that's a problem as well. And so you want to have an understanding of how to walk the line between doing those two things, where you're implicit enough that you're not just getting rejected because you're too obvious, but where you're not hinting in this way that people can't understand what the heck you're getting at. Or even if they, regardless of whether they're getting conscious, their subconscious isn't really getting the message that you want it to get. So that's where we'll start in the next video. And then I have probably a lot more to say for you with the frame and context, because there's a lot here.